Hey guys, you guys are now accompanied with Adrian Palmore, the founder of the Conscious Gym podcast. And what I want to do is give you guys a brief synopsis on my next topic at hand. But I will be accompanied with the wonderful female perspective, Anissa Hudak. She is the founder of the Trauma Healing Yoga Therapy Program. And what we'll be talking about is how PTSD has then affected her life and how PTSD has then affected everybody's life in general. But what we'll also be talking about is different facts and erasing the different stigmas that people have placed on PTSD and raising awareness on how this then affected everybody's life. Now, what I want to do is talk about how she has then incorporated a yoga therapy program for women and everybody around the world to be able to use and be able to help them deal with PTSD in a more fashionable and positive manner. Now, I also want to talk about how her life has then changed from PTSD and incorporating it in her life, and also how she has incorporated yoga therapy to be able to help her and everybody around her deal with this in a better manner. So yeah, I can't wait to get this thing cracking with you guys. All right, stay tuned.
Hi everyone, my name is Anissa Hudak, and I'm a certified yoga therapist. I'm going to have the pleasure of sitting down and chatting with the Conscious Gems host, Adrian Palmore. We're going to be talking about everyone's favorite topic, PTSD. What? It's not your favorite topic? I live and breathe PTSD. You're going to get to hear about my own personal struggle story with PTSD, and you're probably going to get to know me more than you probably want to. That being said, after you hear my story, we're going to get all science and nerdy on you. And we're going to be talking about the actual science behind PTSD. What happens in the body? What creates PTSD? And why do some people get it and some people don't? And how does yoga come into play? We're going to be talking about all of that on our next podcast. I can't wait. Super excited. So please be sure to join us. I look forward to chatting with you then. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Uh, hey guys, you guys are now in tuned with the Conscious Gym podcast. I have a dope treat for you guys. What we'll be talking about is reclaiming life after trauma, and with trauma has correlated to PTSD for this topic at hand, particularly. And what better way to be able to get somebody who knows it more than anybody, but the wonderful Anissa Hudak. She'll be accompanied us. She is the founder of the Trauma Healing Therapy Program. And yeah, so go ahead and take it away. Tell them a little bit about yourself, Anissa.
Well, my name is Anissa Hudak, and I am a certified yoga therapist and PTSD survivor. I'm a two-time rape survivor. I have lost a child. I have had a really terrible birthing experience. I grew up in an alcoholic family, and so I know trauma intimately. Um, and that's to say that, not everybody has to go to war to get PTSD. It happens every day. And most people actually living this human experience that we live have some sort of a level of PTSD. Some of us are higher functioning than others, but we all seem to have some level of PTSD. And that could be just from being in a car accident, being in a mugging, witnessing a mugging, even just seeing someone die. It could be, from clowns. It could be anything. You don't have to go to war to get PTSD. So that's one of the big things that I really want to drive home.
Okay. So my thing is for people who are listening right now. So say if people have things like as far as like for me, I'm real big on I'm afraid of people like leaving me. I looked it up the other day. I'm real big on people like walking out of my life and different things like that. So I have kind of relationship issues, whether it's male or female, whether it's friend or more intimate. So would you say that PTSD can be developed due to trauma, or do you think that it's something that people can be outright born with?
Well, to an extent, PTSD actually can change DNA. And so it is passed on from generation to generation. We already know this, and there is science to back this. Okay. My father was a Vietnam vet, and that happened before I was born. PTSD had already, probably done a number on his DNA, and that got passed to me. It is generational. And at some point, somebody has to stop the cycle. Mm. as far as abandonment issues, you know, where do the abandonment issues stem from?
With me?
Absolutely. Where would you say that they start from?
Well, mine particularly start from childhood. You know, I would think it's one of those stories where it was like, you know, my dad was there partly, and then he just like left, and we used certain excuses to not be where he should be when I felt like he was supposed to be there, as far as like the father figure, as if you will. So, those situations. And then, you know, me and my mom, you know, we had a great relationship. Then things got rough as I got older, you know, being one of those rebelling teenagers and stuff like that. So in a sense, you know, my mom kind of turned her back on me in a sense, but also at the same time I rebelled as well. So it's kind of hard being to take care of a household with 3 children, the house falling apart, not really have a job nor a car, and taking care of somebody who's at your ear talking about where does this go, and you're not even of age to be able to pay certain things or pay a bill or even to understand the circumstances of what a grown-up has to do. Yeah, that's kind of where it stems from. And then also my loved ones, like just walking out or just like leaving and stuff like that. So it stems from like a troubled childhood, you know, so.
Absolutely. Childhood abuse. And that, you know, even neglect is considered, whether it's emotional neglect, physical neglect, all of those kinds of things over time creates a PTSD situation. Now, that being said, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a talk therapist. I am a yoga therapist. And so I'm not able to diagnose people and things like that. But from what I've seen and what I've studied, you know, that's exactly what it sounds like to me. And if it, you know, sounds like a duck and it walks like a duck.
Okay, yeah, because that was just something I knew that I was thinking about as far as my personal situation, you know, because I don't try to do too much diagnosing, but in a sense, like I try to be aware, if you will, genuinely aware of how I am and be in tune with myself, but not only in tune with myself, but also in tune with my emotions, so I don't sit back and I guess be what would be the word for it? I guess not be like attentive to who I actually am and what's actually affecting me, you know, actually get to the root of the problem. Because maybe if I know the root of the problem, maybe I can then get back to, hey, why do you ultimately feel like this person would be against you if they haven't even know what you've been through, you know? Because so it's almost like never giving anybody the benefit of the doubt because of what I've already dealt with, if that makes sense, you know? So, right. But so yeah, actually with us talking about PTSD, what I want you to do is, I mean, you can actually start off by like telling people a little bit about like your program as well, because I think that's pretty dope. About, you know, that you've dealt with PTSD in the shipping form that you have dealt with, but talk a little bit about like your story and then how it stemmed to, you know, your trauma healing therapy program.
Well, as a 2-time rape survivor, you know, I walk the walk every day. I really understand the needs of women. And I realized that there was something missing. You know, one, it's something that's not really talked about. Many women are embarrassed or ashamed, or feel guilty that, you know, they're a rape survivor. Or sexual abuse, molestation, whatever the case might be. And it's like 1 in 4 women have had some negative sexual trauma experience in their lifetime. And it's not something that's really talked a lot about. And I don't understand why not. We have nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be embarrassed of. I certainly didn't deserve it, you know, and so if I had cancer, I would talk about it. So why can't I talk about the PTSD I have because of my rape? Like, you know, we should be able to talk about this. And so some things that I was really looking at, I run a program for women. It's online. They have 24/7 access to yoga therapy with me. It's all recorded. There are also some live sessions that are available throughout the month, but they always have access to 24/7 recorded sessions with me, because at 3 a.m. you never know, you know, what is in your head, and somebody may not be available to chat. But if you could get into a yoga session, a healing yoga session specifically for PTSD, that might help you at that moment. But also to creating a community. And if you look at a lot of self-help groups, so Weight Watchers is one, AA, NA, they all have communities around them, and they heal through community, which is great.
Mhm.
You really can't heal on your own. So that being said, I looked around and I didn't see many communities for women.
Right.
And in this digital age, everything's happening online. And so this was a great opportunity to create a community, in addition to the yoga therapy sessions, for women to come together and be together and heal together. And so that's kind of, what I've created for women. I'm really excited about it. And I look forward to being able to work with women. Watching a woman change on a mat within an hour is an amazing experience. And to be able to, deliver that to women across the world is really just mind-boggling to me. I love it. And so that's kind of what I'm doing.
I think that's very special. And a thing you said was that with PTSD and everything like that, and knowing that there isn't much of I'm pretty sure there are a number of people out there who suffer from this day in and day out. But the thing is having a community where people also feel welcome, because it's better for people to feel welcome in a place where they're like not the only one. Because I know it's easier and hard for a lot of people who feel like, hey, I could just suffer in silence because it's easier to cope with, because I understand that I won't be judged. But at the same time, I would rather deal with this than have to depend on anybody else to deal with it for me. But at the same time, it's better when you actually can look up and say, hey, you totally understand what I'm going through, like, firsthand. And now I can have somebody there to go through it with me, because they understand the pain, but also want to pull themselves out of this, this hole of depression, anxiety, and everything that correlate with PTSD. So I do think it's a dope, like, platform to have people who feel as though they want to incorporate like a positive alternative towards coping with their trauma, because I think a lot of people deal with trauma in a number of ways. And a lot of people like I think there's a difference between like positive coping and then successful coping. So for instance, like, say if I were to I'm having a rough day and stuff like that, and like I start, I come home and I cut my wrist and stuff like that. That's a successful coping skill, because that helps me calm down. It does. It was like not, this is hypothetical. I don't really cut myself, but like, say if I were to cut my wrist or anything like that, that's a successful coping skill. But let's say that I have a hard day at work and things like that, and I come home, and let's say I do get engaged in therapy. Let's say I do uh, um, write my feelings down. Let's say I do come back and I talk to one of my good friends and I start cooking and stuff like that. What that does is that's a positive alternative. It helps people be able to do positive things to get positive results, to help them, give them a positive way to have healthy habits, so a success.
Absolutely. Cutting, drugs, sex, gambling, technology. There's actually what we call the big seven. And there's 7 different ways that people self-medicate. And cutting is one of them.
Right.
And that is not dealing with the PTSD, not dealing with the trauma, and using some other form of self-medication to deal.
Yep. And I think it's a form of escape. And I think that's another reason why I did this big campaign on like suicide prevention, because I felt like a lot of people who feel like they want to die, I feel like it's not big about just the death. I think it's ultimately escaping the reality of their problems, and them feeling like, hey, if I kill myself because I don't have another alternative to be able to deal with this, maybe all my problems will be gone. But ultimately, I think people are just at their wits' end of they're at their wits' end of wanting to fight. It's almost like they're like all these different problems are beating you to a corner, to a point where it's like, okay, I submit. I have no other way to cope with this. I want to actually end it. But it's like, you really just want those problems to go away. And I think another thing is to be able to show people that there are other alternatives for them to use, so that they don't feel like they're backed into a corner to where they have to just ultimately give up, And I
Absolutely.
think
Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I think people don't realize that nothing is forever.
Right.
Everything is constantly changing. And even if you feel like you're, stuck in this corner, there's always tomorrow.
Right.
And nothing is forever. Nothing is permanent. That's the one thing about this life. Nothing is permanent.
You know what I think people I think we get anxious, because I do it myself too, because I understand that we have tomorrow. Tomorrow brings another opportunity, but at the same time, tomorrow brings the opportunity for things to go good and also to go bad. So sometimes we look at things as tomorrow as like, wow, here goes another day for my problem to be prolonged, for me not to have a solution to my problem, if that makes sense. So we get wrapped up in being anxious, of scared of tomorrow, because it's like, wow, I got to wake up to this problem again to figure out how the hell I'm gonna deal with this, so we get in this, like you said, a cycle of regret, trying to find a way to self-medicate that probably isn't the best for us mentally or physically. And I think it just makes a detrimental effect on our mental stability, because it's like, wow, we're going to find out what works, but what if what works is not the best,
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I had to figure out for myself. Because me, I'm not like, I don't smoke, I don't really drink, but it's other things that I do have to do, as far as like to keep myself like you said, let's self-medicate. So for instance, I have to do little things like I have to have like a kind of downtime throughout my whole day. Not a downtime to sit down and relax, but something that'll mentally keep me poised, because my mind is always racing, it's always going. Like, I have general anxiety disorder, plus I have ADHD. So that's something I've been diagnosed with. And for that to be known, I know that I have to do things for me to be able to mentally keep going all day, because my mind will race, even though I take Lexapro as my medicine to help me. So I'll do things like, I'll come home after a long day, because I always have long days. I'll probably watch cartoons. And what cartoons does, it sets me back to when I was little. I had no worries. So it brings back those positive thoughts, and it puts me in a place where, dang, wow, I remember when I really used to watch this when I was little, when it put me in a place of security, a place of peace. So I have a little peace time, a peace of mind time. And then also sometimes I'll watch things that'll keep me motivated to keep going. I'll watch stuff based on where I'll see myself in the next couple of years, do research on stuff to keep planning on my next move for certain things, like my podcast or something I'm doing for my career path and different things like that. So there's those different things that I do for my peace of mind time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people have to find different ways and different every day to stay mentally grounded. I don't think we should pick a day out of the week. I think we should pick an hour or a time out of the day, each day, to stay mentally balanced, because I think that's a better balance component for us. Because 7 days out of the week, you pick one day to have downtime. The average person probably works Monday through Friday, and then you pick Saturday to just take in that whole week, and then Sunday is like another day. So you may have to get in the transition to get ready for the whole week again. And it's like, wow, right back into the BS. And I don't think that's like healthy for anybody to live, to try to get through a week just to wait for Saturday and then get ready for the week again on a Sunday and do it all over again. I don't think that's healthy. But if I were to basically write my whole schedule out for 2 weeks every week, I could then be able to like pocket, okay, this is my time. I'm gonna be able to get myself together, schedule out what I'm going to do, schedule out how I'm going to like pay myself back mentally. Because I think a lot of people see the physical side of all of us, and they treat that as a part to where, okay, that's how good they're doing. Our physical attributes, like my assets, the way I look, the way I carry myself, the way I smell, like those physical assets or things like that, attributes, they feel as though that's how good that person is doing. But ultimately, it's like, the mental part of the inside is what you literally have to take care of almost the most, because that's what contributes to everything else around you, if that makes sense. So with that being said, when you take a peace of mind time for yourself, it makes sure everything else runs smoother, because you've taken time to give yourself a peace of mind, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely. And for me, that's my morning yoga time on my mat, my own personal practice that I'm doing just for me. That's
right.
my time. And that's what helps to keep me balanced and steady.
So I have a question. So for people who let's say we have people listening that don't have a good alternative, like say they're not like, hey, I don't know like what I like to do. I like to, I work all the time, or usually what I've been doing hasn't been working. I suffer from anxiety after I don't take medicine, or I take medicine, or things like that. And I don't have PTSD, but I do suffer from other things, and I've never been diagnosed yet, but I do suffer from a number of things. What would you tell somebody that's trying to find a positive alternative that will work for them?
Well, keep trying things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, keep trying things. Write down everything that you try so you can keep a list. And write a list of things that you want to try. There's so many things out there. For some people who suffer with depression, anxiety, PTSD, what have you, a lot of folks like some sort of martial arts. And for me, I can't do that. To me, it antagonizes me too much. It makes me too angry. And so I can't do that. For me, yoga is very calming, and I need that extra calm. But for some people, they love kickboxing. Some people love to go on a hike. I like to go for a walk. Even just taking your dog out. I mean, that's kind of a moving meditation, if you will. All of these things are really types of meditation. Meditation doesn't have to be you sitting there chanting, with the incense going and the music, and nobody needs that. That's not what it is all about. It can be whatever it wants to look like for you. It could be journal writing. It could be coloring. I mean, adult coloring. That's totally cool.
And this is the thing. I think I agree with that, because what I do sometimes is like throughout the day, say if I'm having like a rough day or something, I was like, you know what? Like I don't use it as an excuse, but use it as leverage for yourself to keep yourself mentally balanced. It's like sometimes I'm like, damn, I'm gonna have a long day. I know I need to give me like something that's gonna give me like a mental boost. So like I'll give me like some sugar cookies that like literally like put me in a better place mentally, or I'll go home and I'll sit down and I'll like watch like cartoons, stuff like that, like before I get ready for my next thing that I have to do. Like, so say if I'm going from one job to the next and I have like an hour or so, I'll like pack my food and stuff like that to get ready for my next job. And what I'll then do is also like sit down and probably watch cartoons, or I'll probably sit down and try to do something for myself mentally, or do a little like, research on things to like help take my mind off certain things. Like, so it's not, like you said, it's not always sit down and chanting stuff with the incense going. It's literally doing different activities. I totally agree.
But what's important is that you keep a list of everything that you've tried, because, if you say oh gosh, going for a hike didn't work. Well, that's okay. Maybe try it again in 6 months, a year, 18 months, because you're going to be a different person then. And you're going to be in a different part of your recovery at that point. And so worked for you right now, or what didn't work for you right now, might work for you then, because you're going to be a different person. So keep that list, because you could go back and retry things. And that's okay to retry things. You're allowed.
Okay, so my question to you is, okay, so were you always, did you always pick yoga, or was it like a certain thing where it was like, wow, I need to figure out what works for me, and how can I cope with PTSD? And, how did you go about picking yoga? Was it a first try, or were you already interested in yoga and was doing it, and then was like, yeah, this is going to be my outlet, and I think other people need to use this as an outlet?
I started doing yoga 13 years ago. And I was with my very good friend. We were stationed at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. And she and I would go and we would take this yoga class, and we just absolutely loved it. And I always said to myself, I would love to learn how to guide other people doing yoga, just like our instructor did. Our instructor was great. I loved it. I loved what we were doing. And so fast forward, my friend and I both moved away from Fort Leavenworth after a year, and she was at Fort Campbell. I was here at Fort Riley, Kansas, and my best friend became very sick. Mm-hmm. And within 5 weeks of finding out she had cancer, she was gone. And I lost my very best friend.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And I floundered. I floundered for a very long time, and I loved yoga and I wanted to go back, and I tried to go back to classes, but I could not be in a class without her.
Mm-hmm.
It was too upsetting. And so I thought, well, if I took a teacher training class and I learned how to do yoga for myself, then I wouldn't have to go to somebody's class.
Exactly.
I wouldn't have to be on somebody's schedule. I could do it for myself. I would be safe, and I wouldn't have to be in a class. So I started taking teacher training classes, and I found that I really loved sharing yoga. To me, it was like this amazing gift that you could share with another person. And it wasn't me teaching. It was literally a gift that I was sharing. And I loved feeling my body on the mat, and the way I felt and the way it moved. I just loved it. And for me, it was a type of meditation. It's a moving meditation. And so I started taking a couple of more yoga teacher training classes. I kind of got the bug. And one of the classes that they were offering was it was through Yoga Fit, and it was Yoga Fit for Warriors. And that was for folks who have PTSD. It was primarily for military folks. And I thought, gosh, my husband at the time was active duty. We had been active duty for many, many years. We knew a lot of active duty members. And I live here at, right outside of Fort Riley, kind of the belly of the beast. We had a lot of guys coming and going from deployments. I was like, it probably wouldn't be a bad idea for me to take this class.
Right.
So I get into it, and I'm about halfway through the first day, and I said, oh boy. I realized that the person I needed to start working on was right here. That PTSD had really crawled into the nooks and crannies of my life, and it was really holding me back in ways that I realized that I wasn't living the kind of life I really wanted to live because of how PTSD was holding me back. And I just hadn't even seen it. I didn't realize it. And so I really started working on myself in that way. And, I'm a work in progress. I'm certainly not healed by any stretch of the imagination, but I certainly have a better handle on my PTSD and my symptoms and what I'm going to let it hold me back and what I'm not going to let it do. And I've been able to conquer a lot. And that's just because of my time on the mat.
Right.
So I'm very grateful. I'm appreciative. I'm grateful. And for me, that's kind of how it came about. I fell into it. I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a yoga therapist.
Okay, right. And I think is part of the battle is being aware of the problem, but not only being aware of the problem, being actually having enough courage to be like, this is the time I want to take back my life, from like what's being swallowing all the amount of time of your life, because I have like episodes where like, I'll be having a great day and I'll come home and it's like, bro, I just had a good day. Why do I feel like I'm gonna go crazy? Like, why do I feel like that? And what I had to come to terms with is understand that it's going to be times like that. Like, how are you going to be prepared to be able to cope with that if there's no other outlet? Like, what if there's no one else that you've been usually using for support not going to be there for you? How are you going to be able to do that for yourself if it's just you? And I had to realize I had to come up with different coping skills to help myself, because I don't want to depend on anybody else to be there for me, because what happens when they're not going to be there? Because I have a big problem with people leaving, and it hurts when you depend on someone to be there for you. And also a lot of people that you may think about this is like, you may be putting pressure on somebody to be there for you, and they're not even prepared to take that pressure on or take that task on to be there for you in the fashion that you want them to be. So you've already created an image for them to like take on a responsibility that they're probably not even ultimately prepared for, So
but it's not their responsibility.
Right.
For us, it's up to you to make your own happiness. It's not up to anyone else to make you happy. You have to make your own happiness, and that's your own responsibility. Nobody can do that for you.
Right. And I think it's too much of a responsibility to say that somebody should generate or create your happiness. Now, I feel like people should add to it, but I don't feel like they should be the source of your happiness, because you know, not to be funny or to limit anybody to their worth, but we're all variables. If you take a person away, they're variable, and then that variable is in your situation or they're not in your situation. So like, say for instance, if I had somebody that was close to me or anything like that, and they were to then leave, I would then have to depend on myself to deal with the situation. You know, that person and that variable is not there anymore. Whatever they brought to the table, they can't bring it no more because they're not there.
Well, as I said earlier, nothing is permanent.
Yeah, right.
Nothing is permanent.
Yeah. And I think we should not get complacent with the places we are in, whether it's good or bad. I think we should always achieve to like keep going. Because sometimes, like, I was in a place where I was depressed, like when I first went to college, real bad. You know, leaving my family behind, getting into it with my family, you know, moving to out of state, still getting into it with my mom and different things like that. And, you know, not being financially stable and stuff like that. Just had Carmelo, and, you know, be thinking about what I could do to get out of depression. I almost got to the point where it was like, this is what I am. You know, I would wake up and literally worry about like, what do I have to worry about today? You know, like that's literally what I found myself doing. And I got so trapped and engulfed in depression that I welcomed it and I stayed in it. I like basked in it, and I did not try to get out of it after a while. I was just like, this is who I am. You know, I'm a just worry because that's how I am. But I'm also going to be depressed because that's how I am as well. And it almost makes people stop fighting because it almost seems as though that depression is so much of a like weight on you, it doesn't leave, you know? So like, I feel like some people like are so depressed, they get to the point where they stop fighting it and they almost welcome it as a part of a tribute to them, you know? And I think it takes on an appearance like on us in a sense. And I think like, you can kind of correlate this with like anything with people feeling as though they're not only just alone, but they feel as though this represents them. Because I feel like a lot of people deal with depression, deal with a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. And I think that people are more, they're more familiar with depression and anxiety, but not other disorders or other things. So they associate a lot of things that are going with just depression and anxiety. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So like, I feel like it's a lot of stigmas that are like a lot of like regular, constant stigmas, I would say, that are literally constantly placed out there that are not good nor bad. Like for instance, when you think of depression, you think of somebody who's like always sad and different things like that. But that's not always the case. Depression shows in a number of different ways. Messy room, change in behavior, change in scenery, change in appearance. And then that's not always a vocal thing. Even anxiety as well. The same, it could be a change of different things. It's not always the stereotypical way that people may think about it. Just like with PTSD, like we talked about before, a lot of people feel like it. With PTSD, it stems from, oh, it's just somebody going to war. They're troubled from seeing people get shot. Now all of a sudden they're suffering. It's not always just that. It's a lot of being able to deal with, like, it's correlated towards trauma. And I think that changing the stigma on that, educating people on that, then gives them a new light and a new idea of, oh, this is PTSD. This is actually more current and common than we may think it is, you know, and not just thinking that every time something is wrong with somebody, oh, they're just depressed or they have anxiety. That makes sense?
Absolutely. I know for me, one of the big changes that came was when I was taking these teacher training courses in yoga. I learned a lot about PTSD, the actual physicalness behind it, you know, what happens in the body. And when people become really educated about what happens in the body, not only do they realize how common it is, but that they might actually, you know, have experienced it on some level themselves. And I really think that that's where the stigma comes from. I don't think people really understand what happens within the body to create the PTSD. And if you don't mind, I'll take a moment and try to explain it real simply, okay?
Go ahead.
All right. So let me ask you something. Have you ever seen two dogs fight?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. And what happens after they're done fighting and they're walking away from one another? What do you see them doing?
Wagging their tail. They're just like nothing ever kind of really happened in a sense.
Have you ever seen them shake?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. And they shake it off, right?
Yeah,
Shake
they
it
do.
off. Okay. So this is kind of what happens. We have two brains. And just like dogs, they have the same thing, believe it or not. We have the reptilian brain. And the reptilian brain is in charge of all basic life functions. So you're blinking, you're swallowing, you're breathing,
Oh, like
notifying you to
yeah,
go to the bathroom, like all of these major just basic functions that you don't even think about. I mean, you don't
yeah,
think about every time you blink or take a breath.
right,
And so the other thing that happens in that reptilian brain is our fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. And it's keeping us alive. And, think back to cavemen, they had to be on guard because they didn't know what was happening. And they lived a good portion of their life, actually, in that sense of fight, flight, and freeze.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have our upper echelon brain. And in the upper echelon brain, we do higher functioning things like math, driving our cars.
Critical
I'm sorry?
critical thinking.
All of our critical thinking, yes.
Right.
And so we have these two brains. And, the reptilian brain does its thing. We don't really tap into it much. And we live in the critical thinking brain. Okay. Well, let's say we're in a car accident. The body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Now, to reset the central nervous system, to get us back into the critical thinking mind, we have to shake. Literally, it's that easy. Just like those dogs did, we have to shake.
Right.
And that shaking helps to reset the central nervous system and flip the switch. That being said, what happens when we don't get the opportunity to shake?
Definitely.
Well, we're not able to reset the central nervous system, and we remain in the reptilian brain. We remain in fight, flight, or freeze. We are hypervigilant, and therefore there's like a skip in the record that is created. And that skip is the PTSD. There we have it. That's what happens. That's how PTSD is created. Now, how is it that you and I could be in the same car accident, but you walk away fine, and I walk away and I have PTSD? Well, that has to deal with different thresholds. Your brain at some point is going to say, I can't wrap myself around what is happening. And it is that overwhelmed sense that also works with creating the PTSD. That has to do with different stress levels. Maybe I had a really stressful day and you had a great day. And so you had more bandwidth, if you will, to be able to wrap your brain around this car accident. Me, I was heavily stressed, emotional day, and I just didn't have the bandwidth to wrap my brain around it.
Right.
That also leads to PTSD. So when you have these, things going on, you can kind of see how easy it is to fall victim to PTSD. When we see someone shaking, especially after an accident, a death, or, whatever the occurrence is, what do we want to do as someone who's looking at someone shaking? We don't like to see that. And so we want to hold them. Or an EMT, they want to strap them down to a board to make sure they're safe. We want to hold people so they don't shake. But really, in reality, we need them to shake. We need them to reset that central nervous system.
I totally agree. I totally agree. I feel like a lot of us deal with a lot of different things in different ways because we figure it out. We try things that we think work all the time. So I think a good thing about all of us is that we try to figure out what works for us, but we don't get a comfort zone to try to figure it out. So I think that's a big thing with what we all deal with is as far as like trying to try things. And like you say, when we go through things, we don't. I think it's necessary that we do shake, but also be aware of what just happened, and don't try to like, shrug it off and say that you are fine, but actually try to digest what happened and figure out what's best for you to get over certain things. Like when we come across death in our family, or when we come across like traumatic events like that, we have to try and digest it and don't just sweep certain things under the rug, because what happens is we all get this thing bottled up inside of us. It's almost like when you shake up you shake up like a Pepsi bottle, with full of soda, stuff like that. When you uncork it, it's all that pressure built up, and one day you're going to burst. So dealing with those different problems and being aware of what the problems are, but actually then trying to find alternatives, but also getting out of your comfort zone. So like let's say for instance, I don't usually hike, but honestly, that may be the different type of experience and setting that I may need to get me through what I'm going through, because I may end up seeing something on that trail that may end up being life-changing, or give me a positive perspective on what I have going on. Like, I may get to the top of that hike and look out around and be like, wow, life is really truly beautiful. Why did I ever try to take this for granted? All of this thing is at my disposal, this view, smelling this air and things like that. It will probably give me a new sense of light to understand, like, wow. And I just started something that I didn't know, and I made a decision to be able to try something new, start this hike that was probably 1 or 2 miles, get to the top of where I was going at the end of the hike, and think to myself, like, wow, I already started this and did this. And now I feel better for accomplishing something new. You never know how overwhelming that could be for you in a positive manner. But also me thinking about what we were talking about as far as, PTSD and how it affects us in trauma. I think we should get to the point where we can reclaim our life. And sometimes it does take a little push. Sometimes we don't always let other people aware of what we're going through. And sometimes they can be a bit selfish to understand, like, hey, I don't think I need anybody to help me out. But sometimes we all need a little help. But sometimes it does take a person to get in there and literally like force people, because we can all be stubborn sometimes with help. A lot of us don't always ask for help. I'm one of those people. I could be suffering and never reach out, but that's something I'm trying to work on. All of us are not vulnerable creatures, but in a sense, we are vulnerable creatures, if that makes sense. But I think it's great to let people understand that it's a science behind a lot of these disorders, and it's a science behind why we feel the way we feel. I don't think people are crazy. I think a lot of people are misunderstood. And I think when I say misunderstood, I think it's not just about they're misunderstood by other people, but I think they misunderstand themselves. A lot of people try to label crazy on things that they don't understand, or on behaviors that they've seen other places, and try to match that behavior to the things that they just seen. So with that being said, go ahead.
The thing about PTSD is that it's so very difficult to actually diagnose because of the magnitude of symptoms. There are so many different types of symptoms, and they don't necessarily correlate with one another. And so you may not understand why all of a sudden, you have to have the TV blaring in order to hear it. Do you realize that is actually a PTSD symptom?
Mm-mm.
Do you realize that light in the eyes, do you notice that maybe some people wear their sunglasses all the time and they're very sensitive to light all of a sudden? That's actually a PTSD symptom, because
Wow.
PTSD is such an inflammatory type of disorder. It can inflame and swell the actual bones in the ears that help us hear, and it actually can swell the optic nerve in which we see with. And so who would have thought that would have been PTSD symptoms?
Wow.
So it's the typical depression, anxiety, hypervigilance, the sleep disturbances, but it's also, weight and eating habits, and again, the seeing and the hearing. And so it touches everything. I've heard people who lost their sense of smell and taste.
Jeez. Because it's hit them that hard.
Well, because that's how it affected them. And this is such a personal, intimate, individual kind of a thing that people might have all of these strange symptoms and not realize that they actually all go together.
Wow.
And so that's why it's so hard to diagnose the PTSD.
Do you think, what about like memory? Like, cause like when people get diagnosed, they have to then talk about like, hey, what happened? What correlated to this? What do you think that your PTSD stems from? You go through the little test and everything like that. So my thing is, what about not their sense of memory, but like them recalling the situation. Because say, like you said, me and you both get in an accident, and then me and you recall the situation totally different because of our perspective, our angles, how we were raised, and everything like that, and how we were affected. We were on different sides of the car. We were hitting different angles. We were hurt differently. So like, what about that? Do you think that plays a part in it as well, of how we perceive things? Because what if I'm more, I wouldn't want to say dramatic, but what if I'm more detailed or things like that, and the same thing happened to us, but I was affected in a different manner, as far as like, that's like, I would say somebody being in a shark attack, to somebody who's saving the shark victim, the shark attack victim, and then the person who is the victim, they're going to have different experiences, but they both can then suffer from PTSD from that. So
Yeah.
like, do you think
Well,
the memory plays a part?
oh, memory plays a huge part, and I'll explain why, the actual science behind a memory.
Mm-hmm.
When your brain records a memory, it picks it apart. So all of the visual goes to one part, the smell goes to another, what you're hearing goes to another part of the brain. So the memory is actually cut up, dissected, and sent to all of these different parts of the brain.
That's
And
dope.
when you have PTSD, these channels kind of get scrambled. And so you don't get a full memory to come back together. So maybe like you don't get the sound or you don't get the smell or something, right? Well,
Right.
the brain doesn't like a memory that's not complete. So it does you this favor and it fills it in for you. Now, it may not be correct, but you have a complete memory and the brain is happy. Well, then you're not really remembering the memory as it was or as it happened.
As accurate as it was, right?
Exactly. And so that's why folks who really struggle with PTSD have problems with their memory and have problems with the incidents that create it, because it's really hard to bring that whole memory back together sometimes for some people. I can tell for me personally, I can remember any word to any 80s song when I
Mm-hmm.
grew up,
Right.
because that was prior to a lot of my trauma. Now, right
Right.
now, I have trouble kind of remembering what I had for breakfast. I
Mm.
can still remember any 80s song, but breakfast, I struggle with. Um,
Okay.
so
Right.
it could be long term, it could be short term, it could be the memory itself. There is something called EMDR, which is an amazing way. I can't do it. You have to actually go to a talk therapist to have this done. I myself have seen it on clients. I myself have had it done to me. It is amazing. It really helps to bring the memory back together and unscramble those channels. And that's why people get triggered. All of a sudden they smell something or they see something or hear something and it brings them right back to that memory. That's because you've heard that in the past and it conjures up that memory and it triggers you. It triggers you and it takes you back to that place. And it's just the brain trying to put it all back together. And that's really what a trigger is. It's just trying to bring that memory all together, back together. And the great thing about a trigger is that, a trigger really sucks when you're going through it. I mean, they are not pleasant. And it wants to drag you back to that moment that you really don't want to remember. But if you can take that trigger and say, okay, this is a breadcrumb. My brain is giving me a breadcrumb. It's telling me where I need to go next to have, the next part of my healing journey. So you take it to your therapist and you unpack it. You got to say, listen, I've been triggered. This is what triggered me. I heard this, I smelled this. It made me think of this. And, what do I do with this? Your talk therapist is going to help you work through that. And maybe doing EMDR around it will help. That's what my therapist did with me, and it helped amazingly. I highly recommend it. But that was for me. And maybe it's going to take something else for you or anyone else. But it would be something that I would recommend. And so that's how memory is treated with the brain. That's why we get triggered. And that's why, folks sometimes have really bad memories. As far as, God, I can't remember, anything. And for me, like I said, my long-term memory is great. I remember every word to every 80s song, but I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you what I had for dinner last night.
what I do, I have a question as far as like, because I've heard this with a number of times, like about people feeling that they've had a dream a long time ago and not knowing if it truly happened because it felt real. And then later growing up and understand, feeling like they feel like that truly happened to them, but they really honestly don't know. And I've had a close friend tell me that before, that they feel like they've had a dream and they've gotten so much older to the fact of where they don't know if it was a dream or if it really happened. So they don't really know if they should act on it or not, but they actually suffer from that like it really happened to them. So, but it's
And
like,
that would be something you would want to take to a talk therapist and
Mhm.
unpackage.
Right. And that was kind of something, the same thing I actually like told them as far as that. Um, and I think a lot of us is people who deal with these different things. I think a lot of us is being in tune with who we are as people, but also understanding the problem and try to work through ways to get through the problem, but like being aware of it. Because I think a lot of us try to run from the problem with like what's going on. Like for instance, for me, for a long time, like when I would be depressed, I would also try to run from it. But then at the time, I would welcome it so much to the point where it's like, I don't care. I'll just be depressed. It's kind of who I am. But and that's another reason why I was like saying earlier, like, don't be complacent. It's always a way to fight what you're going through. And it's always a way to get through what you're going through. And like you said, like, it doesn't last always. But for the people who are very anxious but depressed, we're anxious to try to get out, or we're anxious to try to figure out, oh shit, what's coming next, you know? So I think it's just one of those places where we get stuck between a rock and a hard place, you know?
To an extent, I mean, like my memory issues, I'm not, I don't really apologize for it. I'll explain to someone, due to PTSD, I have a lot of problems with my short-term memory. You'll have to excuse me. I know that you said this to me. I don't remember. Could you repeat that for me?
Mm-hmm.
I have no, I'm not ashamed to say that. I have a girlfriend who has PTSD, and she has problems with math. And she said,
Mm-hmm.
do you know how embarrassing it is to be out to dinner and the check comes to me and I have to figure out how much I owe and I can't do the math. And
Yeah.
she said, she's like, it's embarrassing. And I said, but so do you take out your phone and you take out your calculator and you either figure it up or you say to somebody sitting next to you, could you please do this for me? I have PTSD. I have problems with my math. Just figure it out. It's
Yeah.
okay. You're allowed to say that.
No, you are. Yeah.
You're allowed. I'm allowed to have short-term memory lapses. It's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I mean, what are you going to
Yeah.
do? Take away my birthday?
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah. I think people come to terms with understanding that it's different. It's different from me saying that I'm okay with who I am as a person, but also okay with knowing that this is part of my life, but also not letting it be the prime definition of who I am as a person, you know? So I think that's
Exactly. I mean, I take lots of notes. I have
yeah,
notes everywhere. I
right.
have notes who have notes. I mean, so I
Yeah,
can remember things,
right,
I'm trying to be proactive. I have notes on my phone. I do all kinds of things to be proactive, but there's only so much I can do. And when it comes down to it, and if I forget something, I'm going to say I forgot.
right. And I think that's the great thing about is knowing what to be complacent with and what to be adamant about. You know, like me, like like me, I don't want to put a bad connotation on it, but I'm complacent with my, like, I have two disorders. I have that. I have ADHD and I have general anxiety disorder. I'm complacent with that, meaning that I'm okay with this, knowing that this is what I'm going to deal with for the rest of my life. What I'm adamant about is spreading awareness on it, but I'm also adamant about not letting it get taken from my life like it's done in the past. So that's what I want people to understand, that I'm not just saying, like, if you have a disorder, I want you to embrace it, but also be aware of what it does for you and what it does to you, but also let it work in your favor, and also treat yourself because you can always lose yourself with these things because they can literally take over your day in an instant. Like, it's happened to me. I will go from one mood to the next in 5 minutes. And sometimes I don't want to ultimately blame it on my disorder, because I don't want to be one of those people who's like, one little inconvenience, oh yeah, that's my anxiety, that's my, I'm not one of those people, but it's almost to the point where I'm so in tune with it, I can feel it coming, I can feel it when it's present, and I can feel it when it leaves. Just like when I take my medicine, I can feel my medicine wearing off, I can feel my medicine kicks in, because I'm in tune with it, I'm aware. So I think a lot of people just being in tune with what they are doing and how they're going to go about dealing with their current problems, and be adamant about it, because trust me, nobody else is going to care as much as you need to care, you know. And I don't think other people should want to care more than you about getting you help. But sometimes it does take that with people who have a very, very serious problem.
Absolutely.
I just, that's kind of how it is. But so what do you think? How do you feel about changing the stigmas placed on PTSD? Because my biggest thing is I think it's just honestly just educating people on it. But what do you think?
I think it's education. I think when people really understand the science behind it, and it's not just people going crazy, there's a real physical aspect to it, but it manifests as a mental health issue, but it
Right.
starts in the body. And when people really understand the science behind it, I think that's going to really help people say, gosh, these people aren't crazy. There's something literally wrong with their central nervous system. That's all it is. And we have to help them reverse that. And that's why yoga therapy plays such a crucial part in this. We are actually able to help people really switch that switch. We work generally in my classes, I work with something called the psoas muscle. Have you ever heard of that?
No, inform me.
Okay. So the psoas muscle is, in my humble opinion, the most important muscle in your entire body. Have you ever been injured or sick and you've curled up into the fetal position?
Yes.
Okay. And so you might have heard of it called the hip flexor.
Yes.
Okay, well, also known as the psoas muscle. What it does is it tightens up, and it's protecting all of your major internal organs here in the trunk. Without that muscle, you would, leave your all of those organs exposed, and you could perish, right?
Okay.
So to me, it's the most important muscle. Well, not only does that muscle do that, but it's also the emotional warehouse of your entire body. So all of your happiness, your joy, your anger, your frustration, your grief, everything is housed in these two muscles. And so
I thought it was okay. So the amygdala is, that's something different. Never mind.
That's in the brain. That's in the brain. Now this is in the body. And so in our yoga therapy class, we really work that psoas muscle to exhaustion. And when we do that, I hear people saying, gosh, my legs are like jelly. Gosh, I feel them like twitching and spasming. Sometimes people don't feel anything, and that's okay too. But by working that psoas muscle to exhaustion, we allow it to have little releases. And it's releasing a lot of emotional baggage that you don't need to carry. And by doing so, it's helping to reset that central nervous system and bringing us back into the critical brain.
Wow.
By releasing that emotional baggage, it gives you more bandwidth. And so when you step off your mat, you're better able to face life and all of the challenges that it's going to throw to you because you've dropped some of that emotional baggage. And it's helped bring you back into the critical brain.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So it's definitely a science behind the yoga. It's not just about, hey, come on, yes. So because I want people to. I don't like when people are like, a lot of people aren't really like educated on like yoga, how it definitely works, because they feel like it's just stretching out with music and then just relaxing. But I think it's deeper than just that. People have overcame great things with yoga. We covered a lot. Tell the people about like any kind of current projects that you got going on and anything like that you would want people to know about that they can be a part of.
Well, like I said, I do have that community for women who have been sexually traumatized. Okay. You can check me out at www.traumahealingyoga.com. That is my main website. I do have all kinds of programs for women. I do have a program for just everyone who might have sustained some sort of PTSD, non-sexual trauma related. And so I have a Facebook group for those folks. But if you go to my main website, all of the information is there. You can find out all about me and my credentials if you're concerned, and all that kind of stuff. I have my vlogs there.
Right. That's dope.
That's all me.
Okay, that's dope. So, would there be any way that people can contact you? Would it be through your email or anything like that?
You can contact me through my main website. That's probably the best way, or you can find me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Pinterest. I'm everywhere. I'm like a bad penny.
And if anybody wanted to get in contact with you to try to be able to be part of this project with you, how would they be able to reach you through getting contact through your social handles, right?
Social handles, or just go to the main website, traumahealingyoga.com, and all the information is there.
Okay. Man, I think we covered a lot of great things. I think we educated some people who have been with us this whole episode throughout the whole way. I really appreciate you for being like a guest on the podcast. We're definitely going to do some more shows where we'd have to. I think it's very educating and empowering for people to understand that there is a vulnerable space out here on these podcast platforms for people to understand and get educated on different things that they haven't been familiar with. So I think knowledge is power, and I think we just gave a lot of people power right now with educating them on PTSD and how it's then affected your life and how it's affected many people's life. Because I think this is to be honest, I think this is a day-to-day fight. People literally wake up fighting for their lives with PTSD. And I think giving people positive alternatives like what you're doing with your yoga therapy program, I think it empowers and encourages people to be a better person, not only mentally, but physically. So I think it's pretty dope, and it's very special that you've been doing this to turn your whole background into doing what's something positive. I mean, I think it's very dope.
I appreciate that. My mat has saved my life.
Trust me. Yeah. And I think a lot of people can vouch for how different things have saved their life. And I think it's great that you've turned, your trauma to triumph. And I think that's very, very dope, because it's crazy to have something like that happen to you. And it's like, you know what? I'm gonna take my life back. Not only for it to happen once, but twice, but not only for that to be the place in your life where it was the biggest moment. It was other things that added to your PTSD to have a bigger magnitude. And I think that you finding a positive alternative to be like, hey, I'm gonna take my life back and I'm gonna help you take yours back as well. I think that's very special. It shows a lot of courage and stuff, because a lot of people aren't as blessed to have been that powerful to be able to do that, because a lot of people, it's swallowed a lot of people whole. And God rest their souls, and hopefully they're still fighting the fight to be able to get their lives back and things like that. But I commend you for everything that you've done and continue to do what you do. I really appreciate you and your work.
Thank you. You're making me well up. Stop.
No, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing, because I appreciate people like you, because I too have to fight a certain fight day in and day out, and I've went through certain things that I've had to literally be like, you know what, let me create a platform for me to be able to voice my opinion on things that not even my opinion, but my perspective on things that I've had to notice about myself, and even create a vulnerable space for myself, because it helps other people. And to know that me and my story has then touched people's lives, it helps out. And I'm not even finished telling it. I haven't even told all of it. So to show that it touched you in the way that it touched you, and then to show how strong you are, and it's like you want to be part of something that I'm doing. It's like, I want to be something part of what you're doing, so
thank you.
I think it's very special that you're doing what you're doing. So yeah, to anybody out there who wants to get in contact with Anissa, you can always hit her on her social media handles, from her Twitter, her Instagram, and her Facebook. It'd be a great dope way to be able to get in contact with her. I think it'll be very interesting. Also, you can always reach out to us. We were going to be doing more and more episodes in the near future, so you can look out for both of us to be talking more and more about these different disorders and about different ways of how you can deal with yourself and gaining a peace of mind with your mental health. So I think it'll be very, very imperative that you guys tune in to these next episodes, because I'm going to be dropping back to back some great things for you guys to educate yourself on. Again, you guys can hit me on Instagram at AD_Palmore. You always can find me on Twitter. It's going to be Adrian P_MM. And you can always email me questions or anything of that nature on adrianpalmore19@gmail.com. And yeah, and tune into our episode. It'll be up shortly. And I want to appreciate you again. Thank you so much, Anissa, for
Thank you.
everything.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. I really appreciate it.
Yep, no problem. All right. That concludes our episode. Thanks so much. That was dope. All right. Thank you so much.